Guess what? Before you heard about Christ, God's Holy Spirit was drawing you to God. And those who've never heard about Christ, God's Holy Spirit is drawing them to God. Now, exactly how God is going to judge those who've never heard about Christ, I do not know, because Christ never specifically addresses the question, but the Bible does clearly say that there are going to be a boatload of people in heaven who never heard the word Jesus Christ. But those people are only going to be in heaven because Christ bled and died on a cross.
How do you know the words in the Gospels are actually the words of Jesus?
Ooh, great question. So firstly, you got to come to starting out with, did Jesus exist? So did he exist with historical documents of the Gospels? Are they telling the truth? And then what about the 10 extra biblical sources we had just within the first 100 years where his life ended, and then we had post 100 years, all of these different writers, it actually went up to 25, 150 years out, talking about him. So we could say, most likely, the dude existed. So start there, and then you gotta go to, okay, well, we have enthusiasts who talked about what his words were, what he said. Yes, he spoke in Aramaic, but eventually they were written down in Greek, so there was some translation going on there. And people would say, well, see, there's his buddies, or a friend of a buddy who wrote these words claiming this is what he said. So it can't be true. What? What in the world? There are many baseball enthusiasts who've written books on baseball. And just because they're baseball enthusiasts who perhaps knew Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, doesn't mean they were lying about their statistics and the amount of home runs they hit. So we got to get that out of our minds. And even then, there were enemies of Jesus who were writing about him and some things he said. But it's way clear we have, because of the amount of sources in the New Testament who did reference things he said. And then the amount of manuscripts. 20,000 plus manuscripts in Greek and Latin and other languages talking about here's what he said. All agreeing. It's only later on that you get the Gnostics or the Apocrypha, where all of a sudden you see some dissimilarities, and then you have to weigh that. So, who Jesus was, who were these guys who were writing? See, the other part is they were enthusiasts, and they were also very credible characters within that day and age. Now, yes, did Peter, for example, deny and come back, and then his character was renewed? Yes, they were sinners at the same time. But no, you've got a guy like Luke, incredibly renowned, well-known guy, in the community as a doctor, writing to excellent Theophilus, who was another well-known, brilliant guy, most likely a businessman in the community. Then you have internally within them. You say, okay, well, I'm still not convinced. What, you got 4, 5, 6 sources there if you include Paul? And then you got his 13 writings. Well, I'm still not really convinced, though. All right, fine, look within the documents themselves. You've got footnotes, Simon of Cyrene, Malchus, Rufus. You've got all these different guys, the 500 that you could go to, all these different women, the women at the tomb themselves. Go to and check with them. See, so it's not just a few dudes writing about Jesus saying, yeah, this is exactly what he said. No, there's endless amounts of people within these historical documents and outside who have these claims and then talk about what he said. But don't forget, last point, let's say some of them got a few of his words wrong. That doesn't discount what happened at the tomb. Either he actually rose from the dead or not. You could take away the Bible. There was no Bible, and there were thousands upon thousands of Christians who existed before those documents. So you take away the Bible, and you take away perhaps perfect translations of these specific gospel writers, and you still fully have what is most important intact with his claims, and that he pulled it off through the resurrection.
Before Jesus was crucified, he prayed to his Father, correct?
Correct.
So I'm kind of just confused on, like, if he was fully God, how was he speaking to God?
Good question. God is spirit, which means you cannot confine God to a torso, 2 arms, and 2 legs, and a head. God is not a material object. God is a spiritual being. That is why God can be in New York City and San Marcos, Texas at the same time. He's not limited to the physical. Jesus Christ claimed that this God who is spirit chose to humble himself and become a human being, which means God the Son, Jesus, limited himself. But that's the key right there. He chose to limit himself and confine himself to a body, which means when they nailed his hands to a wooden beam on a cross, it really hurt. He wasn't just a spirit floating around. It means he really got hungry, and that's why he ate. It means he understood what it was like to be rejected, to be scorned, the same way you and I know what it's like to be rejected and scorned. So he was really a human being, but he was more than a human being. He was the eternal God who is spirit.
So was he like praying to himself?
Good. All right. When Jesus walked on earth, heaven was not empty. Jesus is not all of God. Jesus is part of God, God the Son, who humbled himself, took upon himself a body, but he was not just a man. He was God in human form, but he wasn't all of God. That's why he talks to his Father. That's why he talks about the Holy Spirit. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, my other question is, I see like a lot of like stories from the Bible and like kind of like miracles, I guess. And I was kind of just wondering, why does it seem like God was more present back then than he is now?
Okay,
I don't know if that makes sense or if it's like a weird question, but it kind of just seems like back then everything was like more present than it is now.
Good point. All right. The Bible is ESPN highlights. The Bible is not, oh, God is turning water into wine at every party in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Right? No. At specific, unique times, God performs a miracle. The reason we call it a miracle is because it is not natural. In other words, it does not happen on a regular basis. It is unique. Does that make any sense? Now, what is a miracle? A miracle is the God who created the natural world intervening and changing or adding to a natural law. If I put $1,000 in my top bureau drawer today, next week I put another $1,000 in that top bureau drawer, and then 2 weeks from now I open the drawer and there's only $100 in there. Have the laws of mathematics changed? No. The laws of mathematics are not changed. $1,000 plus $1,000 does not equal $100. $1,000 plus $1,000 equals $2,000. So what does that mean happened in my top bureau drawer? Someone stole it. Exactly. There was a thief that was introduced. It does not mean that the laws of mathematics changed and all of a sudden now 1,000 plus 1,000 equals 100. So the miracle is not God changing a natural law. A miracle is the hand of God intervening and changing something. Does that make any sense? Okay, what don't you like about that?
I was just kind of confused, I guess.
Yeah, it is confusing. All right, let's say this is an apple tree. We're standing under here, and apples start disengaging from the branch. What happens 100 times out of 100 to the apple? Where does it go? Hits the ground. Why? Because the law of gravity is consistent. It doesn't change in 5 minutes. The law of gravity is a natural law, and we live in fortunately, a world where gravity works. If gravity didn't work in 5 minutes, he and I and she would be in a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble. But if while we're standing under here, the apple disengages and the gravity pulls it down to the ground, but my hand reaches out and catches the apple. Does the apple hit the ground? No. Nothing has changed about the law of gravity. What has changed is the introduction of a hand, my hand, and I catch the apple. That's what a miracle is. A miracle is not a contradiction of science. It's not a contradiction of natural law. It is a statement that there is more than just natural law. There's a supernatural being who can intervene. Not only that, Jesus was born of a virgin. Oh man, Cliff, you got to be an idiot to believe that. Don't you know biology? Yes, I know biology a little bit. I'm not a biologist. What is the virgin birth of Christ all about? It's not about 9 months of miracles. It's not what it's about. It's about one instant God fertilized an egg in Mary. Then what happened? More miracles? No. There's 9 months of gestation inside Mary's womb. Very natural. What happened to all of us? 9 months of gestation. The miracle occurred when God performed something very beyond nature and had that egg be fertilized in Mary's womb. Does that make sense? Thank you, ma'am, for raising those issues. You don't have to believe in God to do good things. Now, what I've been arguing, though, is if there is no God, the good things that the atheist does are not objectively good, they're subjectively good. Which means if I'm an atheist and I define being a good person as respect this woman today, good, that's my choice. But if tomorrow I say disrespect this woman because that's good, I'm not wrong tomorrow, I'm not right today. Why? Because good and evil are all just a choice. Do you like broccoli or do you like asparagus? Just a prejudice. Do you like respecting someone's property and not stealing it, or stealing it? Just a taste. And if today your taste is don't steal, great. But if tomorrow your taste is, yeah, I'm going to steal, equally good, because it's all relative.
Hebrews 11:6.
Yeah?
Let me see.
Without faith, it is impossible to please God,
Please God.
because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Not contradicting anything that I've said. Now, the interesting question about Hebrews 11:6 is, why does it say, without faith, it's impossible to please God? I mean, why is God so hung up about faith? Ma'am, it is real simple. My name's Cliff. What's your name?
Ava.
Ava, good to meet you. All right, Ava, we have this dialogue. If I have faith in you a little bit, after our conversation, will do this, and I'll walk away. If I don't have faith of you, I will not do that. I will do this. Because I don't know whether you have a knife in your back pocket or a gun, and you might blow me away. Now, what is that a statement of? If I do this, it means I think you are a scoundrel. I think you are one warped person. I think it's possible that you might stick a knife in my back. You see, it's a statement of your character, how I view your character. But if I have evidence that you're not a scoundrel, not a murderer, then after our wonderful conversation, I'll turn around and walk away. And what I'm doing is I'm complimenting your character. I'm saying, you're not going to stick it to me. You see how important faith is? If you don't have faith in your roommate, you're an idiot if you go to sleep tonight without checking your roommate's pockets to make sure they don't have a knife or a gun that they're going to stick you with tonight when you're asleep. But if the evidence is Texas State does not accept criminals into the student body, you don't have to check your roommate's pockets before you go to sleep. Does that make sense? Stuart, what do you think?
Well, we've had a big misinterpretation, unfortunately, just starting in the last 10 years in our country and starting at the beginning of this week when we've started talking. And we see a lot. And it's what's the definition of faith? And what's the faith that God desires for us to have in order for us to spend eternity with him?
We can see those through the Bible, and they're all historically accurate.
Beautiful. So when Jesus does talk frequently about believe based off of the evidence of the miracles themselves, that's not blind faith, right? Because he says evidence. He says, here are the miracles, believe in me, and believe what I've come to do based off of the evidence of these miracles, the supernatural. Now, oddly enough, billions of miracle claims, the supernatural acting, have been made in this world just in the last few years. So are we going to say that all of those miracle claims to the supernatural are totally false? And people are either hallucinating, having a drug trip, flat out lying? No, I think there's greater evidence that some of those people, not all, probably had some type of supernatural encounter. Just look at the study of near-death experiences coming out of Duke University. Tons of peer-reviewed journals now based off of near-death experiences that people are having out of Duke. Pretty good school. Pretty scientific. Scientifically driven in nature. So it's not blind faith. But I don't think you are saying, even though you are saying, blind faith. I think you're saying there's evidence that your brain exists. Have you had brain surgery before? No. Okay, so nobody can prove that your brain exists then. Nobody has physically touched it. But there's great evidence for how you're talking in a very intellectually sophisticated way, how you're thinking, how you're reasoning, and being rational. Well, I think there's more evidence that a rational creator created your rational mind rather than it just popped into existence out of nothing. Or that it somehow just slowly evolved from this primal soup that it got to the point of you being this incredibly rational person who dresses yourself very nicely and can think and reason about life, meaning, purpose, have consciousness, abstract, difficult types of concepts that you deal with. I mean, what's more rational? I mean, if you're saying all of your thinking is just because of your atoms bouncing around in different ways, well, then how can you have belief that even those atoms are existing? Because even that should be made up. So when somebody says, oh, it's just blind faith, this faith you have in God. No, there's way more blind faith for me when it comes to being an atheist, saying that the rational comes from the irrational.
How do you answer to the fact that there's so many sects, like the Catholics, there's the Orthodox, the Protestants, some of them deny the Eucharist, some of them deny that God was of one nature. Who's right? Because if one of them's wrong, then, they're not following what Christ taught, and what's worse than to make a lie of God? So which one of them are right? Which one's the way that's following the way of Christ?
Yep. Does anybody have perfect knowledge of biology? Does anybody have perfect knowledge of chemistry? Does anybody have perfect knowledge of U.S. history or African history? No. To think and to demand that I have perfect knowledge in any field of knowledge is so naive, it's so out of touch with reality, it's raw human arrogance. And if you have a professor who tells you, oh, I know everything there is to know about psychology, I would encourage you to drop the class. The dude's out to lunch. John 17, Jesus prayed, Father, I pray the believers would be one so the world might know that you'd sent me. So it was not Christ's idea that we divide as Christians. Rather, it was his idea that we be united and that we love each other and that we learn to accept each other in spite of our differences. That is the accurate definition of tolerance. You don't tolerate me for giving you $100. You tolerate me if I steal $100, then you offer me forgiveness, and you say, I'm not just going to cancel you, Cliff. Hopefully we're going to rebuild the trust that was broken by you stealing $100 from me.
Since Christ is the last way, there's no one after Christ, because there's no one going to come after literal God on earth. What if he preserved the right way on the face of the earth because there's no one coming after him? So why would there have been the Arians and the Nestorians and the Gnostics saying, no, Christ is one nature, or Christ is two natures, or Christ is none of these natures? Would he not preserved it?
Why have you created me in such a way that I can demean them with my chauvinistic attitude? Answer, because it's impossible for God to create me with a free will and then program how I'm going to treat these two ladies. Impossible, irrational. It's about as dumb as saying, hey, God, if you're all powerful, I'm sure you can make 2 + 2 = 5. No, God cannot make 2 + 2 = 5. Why? Because God is not illogical. God cannot lie, we read in the Bible. Not because God doesn't have a free will, but because God's character is holy and good. Therefore, God cannot lie. But God chose to limit his power by creating me with a free will so I can lie or I can tell the truth. I can have a sexist chauvinistic attitude towards these two ladies, or I can respect them as human beings created in the image of God. I don't have to do either. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not hitting the mark where I want. Like, I'm saying, if Christ is the last way, and yeah, people have free will, but would he not have made like a clear statement of what he was, if he was two nature, not? Would he not made a clear statement like saying, these people are saying the right way, like the right description of me? Would he not have made it clear amongst them? Why was there such an argument of what Christ was after?
There is so much evidence that supports the existence of God. Christ has made such a clear statement about who he is, God in human form, and he has provided so much historical evidence about his lifestyle, teachings, death, and resurrection, that the only reason anybody can be an atheist or reject Christ is because they are intentionally running away from the truth. Now, there are good reasons to run away from the truth. I don't want you telling me how to live my life, and I don't want God telling me how to live my life. I'm going to be in control. And I certainly don't want God telling me how I'm to live my life sexually. And I certainly don't want God telling me how to live my life financially. I make those calls, not God, not anybody. But you see, sir, that's not an intellectual problem with God. That's a moral problem with God. And that's the only reason I am convinced people go to hell. Because they have a moral problem with God, and God says, your will be done. Stuart?
But see, that adds credibility to what the gospel writers wrote. Because in Acts, you got the Council of Jerusalem. The gospel writers could have easily gone back and said, uh-oh, this doesn't look too good. Or why didn't Jesus specifically come in and say, hey, the Jew-Gentile divide, this is causing quite a chasm. Let me go in and fix this real quick, and then, hey, I'll take off to heaven. Or the gospel writers, like I said, could have done it where it's, hey, let's not have these documents get out, because this is kind of discrediting our message in a way. So they easily could have just said, let's just wipe it away. There we go. Jesus the first and last. There's no division over our message whatsoever. No, they left it in there because it really happened. And they wanted to be honest to a historical fact that was also extra biblical, by the way. It wasn't just the gospel writers talking about it. And then secondly, kind of like to my dad's point, it's the internal messaging of what happened with Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. That was preached within weeks after the events themselves. Now, it wasn't written down for a little while, about 12, 15 years was Paul's earliest. The creeds, though, were actually written down even earlier. The Gospels, 40 to 70 to 80 years. But again, that messaging, the whole idea that people have brought out here this week is tremendously annoying to me, is this idea of, oh, it's the game of telephone when it comes to those early different messages that were just passed down. They have no historical understanding of oral tradition that was used throughout the known world. It wasn't just like the Christians were. And how intact that messaging was kept. You would be totally discredited, oftentimes to the point of your life was in danger, if you were caught taking a message and sullying it and say, oh, yeah, no, it happened this way. Oh, you would get kicked out of the community so quickly. There were no people who wanted to do that. So, yes, God could have come along and said, oh, hey, here's the perfect Christ, and all of men and women are never to get his messaging wrong, and I will make sure that will never happen. Well, then you get right back to the free will issue. All right, you're going to keep this perfect book written in perfect Greek, and oh, by the way, you have to know Greek in order to be saved by reading it. And oh, there are going to be no variations in it. Absolutely not. And oh, all the science and math are going to come from it. I think you know where I'm going right now. No, God did not create it that way. There's knowledge outside of the Bible, tons of it outside of the Bible, one of it being scientific knowledge, much philosophical knowledge, much of the humanities. God said there's plenty of knowledge outside of this book. Now go and study that knowledge, and so much of that knowledge points directly to him, which is pretty cool.
I just kind of find it hard to believe that if God loves everyone and he created everyone, why is it so easy for him to place people with good hearts and good morals in hell?
All right. Tell me what a good person's like.
A person with good morals.
A person with good morals. Here's one handsome guy. I'm not as handsome as he is. I got a good heart, but I'm jealous. I don't let you know about it. I don't even let him know about it, but I'm jealous. Now, according to God, I'm not this good person that I wish you all would believe that I am. I'm jealous of his blue eyes. All right, I try and be a good person. I'm still jealous, though. You see, that's sin. I try to be a good person. I have never raped a woman. I've never even date raped. I've never even come close. But I have lusted. Which means I am not this good person I wish you all would believe that I am. I have never told a horrible racist joke. But I, as a white American, have had subtle racist attitudes that some of my African American friends had to point out and call me to change. I'm afraid if you were to talk to my wife, she would agree with you. Cliff is a great guy. Overall. But not great all the time, and not too good. You see, ma'am, this whole idea, I'm a good person, it doesn't work when you go to my family, with those who know me best. Because they see my warts, they see my sins, they see my wrongdoing. They see my loss of temper. They see my self-absorption. And Jesus said, it's from within, out of the heart of men and women, that come evil thoughts, fornication, theft, murder, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, wickedness. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a man.
Like, how would you take like a small majority of people compared to like a big majority of people and place the big majority of people in hell because they don't believe in a certain thing, but they could believe in something that's close to it, or they could believe something that's like morally close to or like equal to it?
The only reason people to go to hell is not because of ignorance. It's not because they're dumb. The only reason people go to hell is because they choose to live their life separate from God.
But I thought you said that it was separate from Jesus. Or if you don't believe in Jesus.
That's the next excellent question, which is, who is God? What is God like? And if I tell you that God is a 6'1" white male with brown hair and he really likes basketball, what can you be assured of?
You have a creative mind.
Exactly, and I've created God in my own image.
I'd like to invite you to Grace Community Church, located at 365 Lukeswood Road in New Canaan, Connecticut. Our services are at 9:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. on Sundays. Hope you can join us.